Who is my enemy? Is it you? Is it them? Is it me? This great evil, where does it come from? The lies, destroying our minds, our bodies, our souls. Is this evil in me? Am I slave to my own freedom? A war is on. How do we fight?
All right, welcome to City Church. How you guys doing? So glad you're here. You glad to be here? Did you guys know that we were losing an hour of sleep last night? It snuck up on me, I'm going to be honest. I feel like I was living under a rock this week. But welcome to City Church. Glad you guys are here on time. What in the world? We're going to move the clock back every week. I love it. All right. Hey, my name is Drake. I'm the pastor here. It's an honor to have you gathering with us today. We are continuing our series, Life Beneath the Surface. No matter where you're walking in on your spiritual journey, you are loved, safe, and welcome here. Our mission here at City Church is to help people find their way to God from where they are. We do that by practicing the way of Jesus together in Boulder. And when we talk about following Jesus here, it means organizing our lives around three things. You guys know what they are? Being with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, and then becoming the kind of people that do what Jesus would do if he were us. Absolutely. So there's even t-shirts in the lobby that you can grab to remind yourself. It's almost tattoo worthy one day, maybe. We'll see. So as we practice the way of Jesus together here in Boulder, we're organizing our lives around that space. And so no matter where you're walking in on your spiritual journey, our mission is simply to meet you where you are and help you take some next steps in whatever space you are today. So I hope that you feel loved, safe, and welcome in this community as we're here, both in person and online. Glad to have you. A real quick reminder. By the way, can we put our hands together for Maddie and the marathon announcements? That's a lot of stuff, right? Someone that kind of loosely goes to our church, if they're signed up for our emails, they're like, man, I've been getting the 100 emails you guys are sending out. I'm like, I know it's a busy March, but it's awesome. And then, you can just hibernate for April. All right, really quick, right after the service, we have our spiritual engagement training. And so in all of these events that we're doing, the Boco Cider Community Night and Easter, and even just in the spaces where you live, work, and play, we're just empowering our community to move conversations from casual to meaningful to spiritual in a loving way, of just being equipped to meet people where they are and help them take some next steps on their spiritual journey. And so many of you have signed up for this. So right after the service, you're going to eat lunch in the community room from 12 to 12:30. If you haven't signed up but you're interested, it's going to go till 1:30. Lots of actual practice and conversation. So it's not like a teaching session at all. But you're welcome to stick around even if you didn't sign up. But just a reminder, 12 o'clock, you can start eating lunch in the community room. If you are in Growth Track, you'll eat lunch there with us at 12 o'clock. Growth Track today is only 30 minutes. So even if you didn't sign up, like Maddie said, you're welcome to jump in and just hear a little bit more about City Church. And then the spiritual engagement training starts right at 12:30. So you guys cool with that? Everybody feel good about it? All right, very good. Okay, so here's my question for you today. Do you ever feel stuck in yourself? You ever feel like you just got some funky stuff going on, you just kind of in a weird spot, the headspace, maybe your attitude, and you can't quite put your finger on it? Have you ever been there? Oh, good. Look at you. Man, last week I was talking and it was like I was the only one with issues. So I'm so glad that three of us today are feeling a little more in this. So have you ever been in those spaces where it's kind of hard to identify what's going on? Like you're not sure why you're grumpy or why you're responding or where those feelings came from or whatever. You might be dealing with, in those spaces, you might be dealing with what Pete Scazzero calls your shadow. Let me give you just a brief definition of your shadow and just let me know if this sounds like something that you've experienced before. Your shadow is the accumulation of untamed emotions, less than pure motives and thoughts that, while largely unconscious, strongly influence and shape your behaviors. It is the damaged but mostly hidden version of yourself. You guys know what I'm talking about? That exists somewhere, right? It's like Peter Pan's shadow, but not as cool, right? Oh man, let's get rid of that guy, okay? So the shadow, this really challenging space of wildly unconscious and just things that are out of alignment, and it's really hard to put your finger on. So we've been in this series. You can go back and catch up on our podcast, our YouTube channel, all of that. We're kind of working together, moving in a direction, and now we are moving into a space. We've done a lot of practices up to this point to help you get to this place, but now we are going to look at our past. So really, the next 4 weeks can be summed up in this very simple statement, and if you're taking notes, this is for you. Who you are today is largely shaped by where you come from. Who you are today is largely shaped by where you come from. Or another way to say it is our present is shaped by our past. Would you agree? Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's kind of like, okay, that was not profound. Okay, you know what? They pay me not for, big profound statements, but by the minute. Okay, so that's why it's a joke. Okay, so our present is shaped by our past, and it's not just your family of origin. We're going to talk about that, but Pete Scazzero would say that your family of origin is the single greatest influence on who you are today, and then the culture that you also grew up in relation to your family of origin. And so obviously there's lots of other external factors and internal factors that influence who you become and who you are today, but your family of origin is the strongest influencer in who you are today. And when we talk about family of origin, we're not just talking about mom and dad. We're talking about like 3 to 4 generations of influence, okay? So that's where we're going today. And so here's the conversation. Until we can see the ways that we have been shaped by our past, there's a good chance that we will mimic how we have been shaped up to this point, for better or for worse, just kind of automatically. So let me give you just a couple of definitions from Pete, from Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. He says, it's impossible to be spiritually mature and emotionally immature. I hate that sentence. I just want you to know, me and emotions don't get along anyway, and so I really don't like it, but it's something I need to hear. It's impossible to be spiritually mature and emotionally immature. In the West, where we're really good at compartmentalizing our lives, the idea is that Jesus is after our whole lives. In fact, Jesus would not say you have a spiritual side of your life and then the rest of your life. Jesus would argue that all of life is spiritual to a degree. And then Pete also says it this way. He says, Jesus might live in your heart, but grandpa still lives in your bones. That's my favorite quote from the book. Jesus might live in your heart, but grandpa still lives in your bones. And so the idea here is that when it comes to apprenticing under Jesus, following Jesus, and understanding who we are, who we're becoming, who we want to become, what it looks like to allow Jesus' worldview to get over our hearts and minds and move in a direction, sometimes in order to go forward, we have to go back. Are you guys tracking with me? And I know that's what you woke up early for that purpose. You're like, you know what I want to do today? I want to go to church and deal with my past. That sounds great, said 3 people who need to go to counseling, right? Like this is not something we necessarily want to dig into, but part of a healthy church that we believe is that we're going to go places together that maybe we wouldn't go on our own. Does that make sense to you guys? So, when Danielle and I, when God called Danielle and I to plant City Church, by the way, if you weren't here, last week City Church turned 5 years old. Let's go. Kind of crazy, big deal, really excited. So when God called Danielle and I here to plant City Church, we went through this assessment, and there was all kinds of people like, hey, do you have what it takes? Is God actually calling you, blah, blah, blah. And so we went through multiple assessments and lots of organizations. Really cool. It was really helpful for us. And they gave us like a yellow light. You can get like a green light, a yellow light, or a red light. And that was kind of the assessment rating. And so we got a yellow light, a green light with conditions. So like, yes, God's calling you. Yes, you're equipped. You're 26 years old, so you got some work to do. And so one of the books that one of the assessment leaders gave me is like, hey, one of the requirements for you moving forward is you have to read this book. And he put the book Emotionally Healthy Leader in my hands, and I had an outbreak immediately. I touched it and I broke out in hives. I'm like, emotionally, this is the most ridiculous book I have ever heard of. And so 26 years old, and I'm like, man, what in the world do I need this book for? And in order to really describe for you, to help you really capture like the emotional health of my life at 26 years old, I think instead of using my words, I want to show you a clip. So this is me at 26.
Hey, Dad. I saved the city again today. I wish you could have seen me. I think you would have been really proud.
There you are.
Oh, Alfred, I am so sorry. I have incredible reflexes.
No, it's all my fault, sir. I should have known better than to sneak up on you like that.
Sorry, I've just lost some thought, and as you know, when I'm in there, I'm in deep.
Were you looking at the old family pictures again?
At the what? The old family? Oh, yes, I see what you mean. Look at that. The old gang. Yeah, no, I wasn't.
I see. Sir, if you don't mind my saying, I'm a little concerned. I've seen you go through similar phases in 2016 and 2012 and 2008 and 2005 and 1997, 1995, 1992 and 1989, and that weird one in 1966. Do you want to talk about how you're feeling right now?
I don't talk about feelings, Alfred. I don't have any. I've never seen one. I'm a night-stalking, crime-fighting vigilante and a heavy metal rapping machine. I don't feel anything emotionally except rage. 24/7, 365, at 1,000,000%. And if you think that there's something behind that, then you're crazy. Good night, Alfred.
All right. So that was me at 26. And then I read this book, Emotionally Healthy Leader. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. There might be some things under the surface. There might be some things going on that we should deal with. And so we started this journey of what does it mean to apprentice our whole lives under Jesus. And so that's where we're going today is in order to go forward, sometimes we have to go back. You guys cool with that? You comfortable? All right, well, we're going there anyway, so I'm just trying to give you a little bit of permission so there's some volition in the room. So let me give you a roadmap really quick for the next 4 weeks so that you know where we're going. Number one, today, very simple conversation. We're going to talk about generational sin and brokenness. That's exciting. It's going to be great. Next week, we're going to deal with some relational patterns. So we're going to look at both your family of origin and then circles of influence around you growing up. And then after that, we're going to look at narrative scripts, things that you have learned, again, wildly internal and I'll give you some resources in a minute, but that we actually can look at the scripts that we have learned, ways that we have learned to think and live, and then line those up against what Jesus says is actually true about us, and so find some freedom there. And then lastly, we'll look at generational blessings. So not only what God has done in the past and what he's doing now, but then what we can do moving forward. So that's where we're going. At the end of the next 4 weeks, you're not going to have everything figured out, but here's my encouragement for you. If you will lean in, do the work alongside community, invite the Holy Spirit to work in and through you. I believe that we are, as a community, we're going to find healing, freedom, and genuinely a path toward transformation. You can ask my wife, Danielle. She has this phrase that she uses of the old Drake and then who you are today. And there's like multiple versions of old Drake, kind of like Batman had his different, I've got multiple of them, but Danielle and I, really since God moved us here and we picked up that book and we started a journey with a team around just whole life apprenticeship to Jesus, he's done a lot in my life. And you can ask Danielle that there is a very big difference between old Drake and who Jesus has made me today. And a big part of that was going back to go forward. And I wouldn't have chosen it. In fact, I thought it was stupid. That's the word I would have used. Like, this is ridiculous. Emotions, we don't have time for any of that. Jesus makes all things, it's just joy and let's go and let's work, whatever. I just didn't want to deal with any of that. And Jesus has done a lot to change me from the inside out. Not perfect, not complete by any means, but a different person genuinely. But still, every now and then, that brokenness likes to show up. You guys know what I'm talking about? And so there's this space of processing, both internally and externally, alongside community and with Jesus for our formation. So if you do it right, the goal of this practice is not that you're going to develop a bitterness towards your family of origin, right? But rather, you actually hopefully will develop a heart of compassion and understanding toward others, and you'll identify also things in your life that are out of alignment with the way of Jesus, things that can change, that should be changed, that need to change. And then also there's going to be some honor for your family of origin where you look at the things that were indeed good. You say, hey, let's move that forward. Let's carry that on. And hopefully you also add to that moving forward in the way of Jesus. So let me give you 3 resources really fast. Number 1, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. So when you join the team here at City Church, this is one of the books that we give you. Highly recommend, and its companion is the Emotionally Healthy Leader book that I was just talking about, but highly recommend it as a resource to deal with some of this. And so many of you have it already, but you can also pick it up. It's a great way if you want to dig in more. Number 2 is going to be The Relational Soul. Really helpful book, especially when we start getting into narrative scripts and relational patterns. So the next 2 weeks, massively helpful book if you want to pick that up. And then lastly, this book, The Road Back to You, which is a book on the Enneagram, which allows you to do some internal processing of your own personality, your emotional health. So these 3 books have been massively formational for myself, for our entire staff team, for much of our leadership team. And so I'm just inviting you. Again, you don't need to, you can just be here for 4 services and let God do that work, absolutely. But if you want to dig in more, then I highly recommend these things for you. So really quick, before we get into today's text, you might have some objections as we get into this. And one of the objections that I think comes to mind is you might be hearing all of this and you're like, I'm good. I come from a long line of awesome and I don't really have anything to work on, right? And if that's you, I understand the feeling. But the reality is every family on the planet has some level of dysfunction. Would you agree? And some is worse than others, absolutely. But every family on the planet has some level of dysfunction. And here's what I know to be true. No matter how hard I try, no matter how much I'm praying and committed to the way of Jesus, there's still part of me that is just going to fail my kids. There's still brokenness that I'm allowing Jesus to change in me, and I can't be Jesus for them. And so there are things that I just cannot hold together all the time. And so there's going to be things where my kids are going to be hurt by my brokenness, and hopefully by Jesus' grace and his power, we're going to see a lot of that change. But the reality is there's dysfunction in every family. And one of the challenges I think that I feel is you want to honor your parents, you want to honor your family of origin in the process. But let me just encourage you with this. We don't honor our family of origin by pretending like there's not anything there. Like, the way we honor our family of origin is taking the good, removing anything out of alignment with the way of Jesus, and then actually moving the family legacy forward. And so whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you're dating, whether you're in school or working full-time, or like whatever your life stage is, this conversation is going to be helpful for you. Now, on the other side of it, there are some people in the room that hear this conversation and immediately are like, absolutely not. That's terrifying. My past is too painful. There's way too much there, and I absolutely do not want to go there. And I just want to encourage you and remind you, hey, everything is invitational here, and you are safe, and you are loved, and you don't have to do the work if you don't want to. I just want to encourage you that if you and I don't deal with our past, it doesn't go away. It just gets buried, and it leaks out in other places. And so it's not to say that there aren't a need for community and therapists and counselors and all kinds of different things, depending on the background that we're dealing with. But the alternative is if we just step in and we continue to numb the things in our past, like which, the really big one right now is we can distract ourselves into oblivion, right? Your drug of choice can be anything. And so however you can work hard, you can do Bible studies, and you can chase your hobbies, and you can do, Netflix binges. And I mean, you can have 1,000 different varieties of distraction to keep you from feeling and dealing with the things under the surface. And you can do that, but just remember it won't go away. So how do we deal with our shadow and grow in apprenticing to Jesus to become who he created us to be? So, you guys feeling okay? All right, let's do a quick case study from this really awesome guy. You guys heard of this guy named Abraham? Kind of a big deal. Genesis chapter 12. He's kind of famous, kind of an awesome dude. So real fast, I'm just going to give you a quick case study for our conversation today. This is Genesis 12, where God calls this guy named Abram. He says, go from your country, your people, your father's household to the land I will show you, and I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Do you see how he's there's this passing on, generational blessing conversation happening. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I'll curse, and all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. So there's a lot you see all the blessing language in this very initial call from God for this guy named Abram, who's eventually going to be renamed Abraham. If you've been around the church even for a minute, you know the song, Father Abraham. I didn't have many sons. Yeah, I didn't grow up in church, so I didn't actually know that, but I've heard it. I think it goes like that. But I think what we find is, Father Abraham had many sons, and they were all jacked up. I think that's how the song should end, but we omit that part. And so here's this hero of the faith, right? I mean, you go to the book of Hebrews. I mean, literally, this guy's incredible. He's got a lot of really good things going. God indeed does keep his promise here. But what I want to show you very quickly this morning is some generational patterns from the life of Abraham into his family. And so we don't have time to go there, so you can actually go read it on your own. Start in Genesis 12 and then kind of follow the family line and the stories and just watch things play out. So God's promise is blessing to move from generation to generation. But what we see consistently, that still exists. That's really cool. God is consistent and faithful on his part. But what we see in addition to that is Abraham and his family, they're conveniently passing on some things that are not quite as helpful. So let's look at number one is every generation, for 4 generations, we literally see the pattern of lying continue to show up. So Abraham, he's worried that he's going to get killed by this foreign nation. And so he's like, hey, Sarah, his wife, hey, lie and tell them you're my sister so they don't kill me. So he's manipulative and he's scared for his own skin. And so over and over again, he lies. And guess what his son does? Lies the exact same way. has his wife lie in order to protect his own skin. So we see over and over again, Abraham lies twice. Isaac and Rebekah, they lie in their marriage. Jacob lies to almost everyone. Literally, one of their sons, his name means deceiver. Like passed on, I want you to see the pattern in Abraham's life is things consistently get worse, not better for the next generation. So we see a pattern of lying. We see later on, Jacob, the deceiver, his 10 sons, they lied to his father straight to his face about killing their younger brother, selling him into slavery, and they hold on to that lie for a decade. That's some dysfunction. Would you agree? You're like, oh man, Thanksgiving doesn't sound so bad at my house this year. Like, so right, that's just one. Look at the second one. The second one is this. There's favoritism in each generation from the parents that causes massive dysfunction in the relationships. And so Abraham favored Ishmael, Isaac favored Esau, Jacob favored Joseph, and then later the younger son Benjamin. I mean, there is consistent favoritism that then creates relational conflict for the kids. So the next one is the sibling rivalry exists in each generation. And again, every time it gets worse. So 1, 2, 3, 4 generations, and it is getting worse, not better, every time. And lastly, we also see poor intimacy in marriages in each generation. So over and over again, we see dysfunction not only with the kids to the parents, siblings to one another, but then even within their marriages, we see massive dysfunction and sexual intimacy outside of the context of marriage. All kinds of different things are happening where Abraham has a child with one of his slaves and trying to make things happen on his own. And Isaac has a terrible relationship with his wife, Rebekah. And Jacob has 2 wives and 2 concubines. And so again, it like gets worse, not better. Are you guys tracking with me? Okay, so part of you like, all right, wow, that dude is dysfunctional. His family's dysfunctional. Absolutely. The point here, this is a simple case study for you and I to look at, hey, there's probably patterns in our family of origin that maybe you're aware of and maybe you're not. And so let's look at this from a different angle just briefly in order to help us see that this is not just something that exists in Abraham's life, that probably exists in your life as well. And again, might be influencing some of the brokenness, the dysfunction that you experience and don't know how to deal with. And so what I'm going to give you right now is the most quoted verse of the Bible by the Bible. I'll say it again. The most quoted verse of the Bible by the Bible is the verse we're going to deal with right now. And this is God revealing himself, his character, to this other pretty awesome dude named Moses, okay? So let me give it to you, Exodus 34. So again, this is God revealing himself, his character, his nature, who he is. He's revealing that to Moses. He passes in front of Moses and proclaims, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Sounds pretty good, right? Like that sounds like something like, you put over a door frame on your, frame it in your house. You're like, hey, that's a verse that would be worth memorizing. So over and over again, this is one of those verses that the authors of Scripture cling onto. They come back to like, hey, this is God's nature and his character. But it doesn't stop there. Let me give you the other half. Yet, he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of their parents to the 3rd and the 4th generation. How many of you are like, what the heck? Like, I'm totally cool with like the top half, but like, what's up with God going MMA on like the grandchildren, right? Like, what in the world? Like, how does that? Does that confuse anybody else? You ever heard someone say, oh man, the God of Jesus and the God of the Old Testament, they're 2 different people and they're not consistent? You ever heard that? Right? So what we have to do is we have to be able to reconcile in the entire scope of Scripture what's going on here and what's true. And the good news is, face value, this cannot mean what it sounds like it means. Partly because right after this, God says the exact opposite. So it can't be that. But what is going on here? You and I, we're probably not Hebrew scholars, so we don't necessarily lean in and immediately understand what's going on. So let me give you a better translation of that second half. So he maintains love to thousands. That's awesome. And he doesn't leave the guilty unpunished. God is just, right? Doesn't overlook, doesn't turn a blind eye to justice. The consequences of the sins of the parents are passed down to the children and the children's children. As in, there is collateral damage from the choices that I make in my life. You guys tracking with me? You probably don't have to look very far to understand that that's present in your home. It was present in the home you grew up in. It's present around you. It's probably even present at work or in your relational circles. And it doesn't mean that it has to be like sometimes we go to these really big extremes of really heavy, like sin is just one of those words that like, ooh, like the Mufasa, you know? You're like, oh, right? But brokenness, just dysfunction. So let me give you just a couple of things to help you put into a category what we're talking about. This translation is better in the Hebrew, and so what we're talking about is all kinds of brokenness and dysfunction that can repeat itself from your family of origin and continue on. And so this can look like patterns of divorce or addiction or alcoholism, right? One of the things, when you go to the doctor, what do they ask you? Hey, do you have a history of addiction in your family? You ever thought about why they ask that? It could be sexual abuse and unhealthy broken marriages. It could be a mistrust of authority. It can be a variety of sexual sin and addiction. It can be inability to simply sustain healthy relationships, right? There's all kinds of different dysfunctions and patterns that we can look at when it comes to what we're talking about here. So let me just use the very simple example of divorce. And this can be one of those things, it's very touchy at times because the emotions wrapped up in it. But let's just use it as an example because there's people on both sides of how they experience it. So more often than not, there are consequences. There's fallout in terms of kids walking through their parents going through a divorce. I was talking to my mom this week, who her parents were divorced when she was quite young, and walking through my own genogram, which we'll talk about today, and just looking at my family history. And she said, honestly, for the first time, I've not heard it before. She said, "Man, the pain and the trauma that came out of that was really, really heavy." And I never asked my mom that. Like, oh, wow. Like, you know, so she's just telling me her own personal story. And listen, some people, they come out okay. Some of you are byproducts of divorce. You're like, I'm okay. And some people, they simply are not. You guys recognize that, right? The idea is that there is collateral damage of the choices of the parents. Yes or no? Yeah, right? And I know that can be a painful example, but it's one of many that we can look at in our lives. So what happens, right? As a result, kids can have emotional pain or trust issues, insecurity, confusion over identity, fear around commitment, right? All kinds of different things can surface as a result of the dysfunction of the parents. So here's the point. Our sin, our brokenness, whatever you want to call it, there is collateral damage. Then that's what this verse is getting after. You guys tracking with me? Okay. Don't be discouraged. We're not done yet, okay? What this passage is getting at is that there are patterns of brokenness that can run in the family. None of us start with a blank slate, and you probably already know that. But we are all born into the image of God with self-worth and human dignity, and it's beautiful. But we're also born broken. We're born with dysfunction. We're born bent, one author says. We have sayings in our individualistic Western culture like father, like son. Isn't that interesting? And the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? So even in our hyper-individualistic, I'll never be like my parents, and then you look up and you're like, oh. and the older you get, it seems like the more you can start to put the pieces together, like, oh, look at that. There's that right there. And so part of apprenticing under Jesus requires putting off the sinful and broken patterns of our family of origin and being reparented into the family of God. Jesus uses the language when we trust in him of being born again, literally going from dead spiritually to alive spiritually, born into the family of God. And so we are learning to be reparented under God's rule and reign. Now, the good news that I don't want you to miss here is that you and I can experience freedom. We can break free from sin and dysfunction that goes back for generations. So the Hebrew word here, generation, does not actually exist in the text. It's something that scholars added because you and I don't really have a category for this Hebrew idiom. And so the idea here is that he does not leave the guilty unpunished. The consequences of the sins of the parents are passed down to the children of the children's children. That's helpful for you and I. But really it's to the third and the fourth. So there's two scales here. You have God maintaining love to thousands, and the consequences of the sins of the parents, they exist to the third and the fourth. That's how it sounds in the Hebrew. You guys tracking with me? I need someone feeling like relatively strong this morning. Is anybody feeling went to the gym this week, feeling good about themselves? Strong biceps, can hold at least 30 pounds on one arm. Anybody? Let's go. Come on. Thank you. All right. I just needed one person. Give it up for Paige. Well done. Okay. So, have you guys seen Lady Justice, the statue Lady Justice, before? Okay, so she's blindfolded typically, and then she's holding like a sword, I think, over here, and then she's holding like a scale, right, like in one hand, and it's scales of justice. You guys tracking with me? Okay. So this is Lady Justice. Or Mr. Justice, I suppose. Okay, all right, give me this hand, hold it up flat. Can you balance that? This is not, I stole these from the back. These are for our outdoor flags, but it works. Okay, that feel good? Yeah, all right, see, yeah, it feels good because he's a strong man. Okay, so what I want you to see is when we're talking about like the consequences to the third and the fourth up against God's mercy and his justice, right? The word picture here is like two scales. So you have mercy and justice on one side, and then you have the consequences of the parents on the other. Oh, my family of origin is rough, right? All right, so you okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so I want you to see this picture. The weight of the text is God maintains love to thousands, and the consequences of the parents, they exist, but they're to the third and the fourth. Love to thousands, but the consequence, you okay?
Pastor, please don't.
You got it?
Yeah, I got it.
All right. Love to thousands, and the idea here is that the scales are massively weighted. He's making it look good, but the reality is this needs to be here down here, doesn't it? Right? He's like, you see him toppling a little bit? All right, put your hands together. Good job. Thank you, Paige. Appreciate you, buddy. Thank you. All right, so here's the idea. Very simply, love to thousands, forgiveness, mercy to thousands, and consequences to the third and the fourth. The reality is, this text is about God's character, who he is in the middle of everything that you're walking through. He is consistent, mercy, love, forgiveness to thousands, and consequences to the third and the fourth. Yes, there is justice, but God's mercy far outweighs his justice. It's not incomplete. This is just the nature of his character, almost like a parent to a child. And so what I want us to see as we talk about generational patterns of brokenness, maybe some things are already in your mind, but the idea is that it can all be broken. All of it. So when you think about sin, when you think about brokenness, I need you to think about it in three categories. There's sin done by you, sin done to you, and sin done around you. So when we're looking at our past, and it can be a very painful journey. We can look at sin done by you, the things that we have done that are out of alignment with God's worldview and who he made us to be and how we're to treat other people, how we are to understand and love ourselves and our neighbor. Sin done to you, things that you had nothing that you did, but it happened to you. And then, quite frankly, sin done around you, just being in the environment. And as we look at those things, we say, okay, man, this is in my past. And the good news is, because God's mercy is to the thousands, that all of it can be broken. And some of us, I think we get in these places like, hey, you don't know what happened when I was, no, listen, all of it can be broken. Man, you don't know what I've done. All of it can be broken. You don't know how much this is freighted in the identity of my family. All of it can be broken. So let's wrap it up with Jesus to really help us understand what we're talking about. Hebrews chapter 4. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, this language from the Hebrews, high priest is the one that would intercede between God and people. So used to in the Old Testament, you get your sacrifice, you do some things, kind of get ready, and then you would go to the temple and you would give the sacrifice to the priest, and then they would sacrifice the animal on your behalf to atone for your sins. And then Jesus steps in as the great high priest. And the author of Hebrews says, since we have a great high priest, this mediator between God and us, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith that we profess. Faith simply means to trust in the character and the identity of who Jesus says he is, what he said he can do in our lives. For we don't have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. It's one of the temptations, one of the lies. Is they don't understand. There's no help for me in what's been done to me, around me, and by me. But we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Where we failed, Jesus has never failed. And let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we might receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. All of it can be broken. I love Eugene Peterson's translation. Let me give you that because I love how he says it. He says, now that we know what we have, once you really understand who Jesus is and what he's done, Jesus, this great high priest with ready access to God, let's not let it slip through our fingers. We don't have a priest who is out of touch with reality. I love that. He's been through weakness and testing and experienced it all. but didn't sin. So let's walk right up to him and get what he is so ready to give. Take the mercy. Accept the help. You see that? Yeah. Loving forgiveness. Steadfast love to thousands. Mercy available. So here's the big idea for today. Very simply, the past has shaped your present, but it does not have to shape your future. The past has shaped your present, but it does not have to shape your future. There's hope and forgiveness and mercy and grace and power in following Jesus in community where we find healing and wholeness and freedom. So let's go to some next steps really quickly. As we talk about reflection and practice, number one, I want to encourage you to identify patterns of generational sin and brokenness through the tool that we're handing out today called the Genogram. You're going to get one of these today on your way out. It's a very simple little blank piece of paper with a little family tree. This is called a Genogram. It's a very helpful tool. When you read Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, we'll talk about it. Myself, my wife, our staff team, this is one of the tools that we used right when we moved to Boulder before we ever even launched City Church. And this is a very simple tool for you to just take a glance into the past. And on the back, there's some helpful questions for you to ask yourself, things to consider to help you actually start to fill it out and say, how is this thing helpful? So I filled mine out for you kind of briefly. So here's mine on the screen for you, okay? Look at that. Pretty nice, huh? You're welcome. I did that. So very simply, this is my Genogram, kind of, and again, to honor family and not, just air all my dirty laundry. This is just like a super general version. Everybody's got one, right? But all you do is you go in and you add yourself, and then if you're married, you add your spouse and any siblings, and it's just a family tree. It's very simple. But the tool is going to give you not only the ability to fill it out to the third or fourth generation, which is the goal, but then in addition, then to identify relational patterns like we're going to talk about next week, narrative scripts, consistent dysfunction. And so actually it's kind of cool. This week, I was working on my Genogram again. And so my mom and my dad come from large families on both sides. But one of the patterns that my brother and I and my mom we were talking about this week is there was actually a consistent pattern of divorce in both of their families. There's quite a bit of relational dysfunction early on in their marriage. And the more we dug into it, one of the words that I used this week is, Mom, it's a miracle that our family isn't as jacked up as it could be. Because they came from some hard stuff. Both sides of my family have experienced like tragic loss. This represents some of the exes. And so again, you kind of do the work and you go in. Like my dad lost his dad at 18 years old. His best friend on the planet. My mom's stepdad and brother were killed in a motorcycle accident when he was 18, 19 years old. And my family has walked through a lot of brokenness, a lot of trauma, and a lot of dysfunction. And I called my mom this week and I said, man, thank you. You and Dad broke some patterns, but whether you realized it or not, and I think they did, talking to them, they're like, man, yeah, we've got to do something different than what's happened, what's played out for us. And so there's a lot of health, there's a lot of healing, there's a lot of wholeness, there's a lot of life that has come into our family thanks to a decision that my parents made and some things that God even did in our family. But there are still some things that are broken, right? There's still some dysfunction. There's still some things that I've identified, ways of thinking, ways of behaving, narrative scripts that I'm like, hey, that doesn't exactly sound like who Jesus says that I am or the way that I should be thinking. And so this is my very, very simple one, just to give you an example. And I just want to invite you, use the tool and just kind of look for patterns and start to write it down, flesh it out, maybe with, and you might have to call, mom, dad, whatever, like in order to kind of figure out some of it, but you start to work it out and just look for patterns. That's all you're after. Look for patterns. And listen, guys, the goal is not to blame shift or cultivate bitterness. The goal is to generate understanding and compassion and to find healing. That in the same way you come from dysfunction and brokenness, so do those that came before you. In addition, not only that, but I want to encourage you to guard your heart and mind against blame shifting and bitterness. That's not the point of it. the goal is not to go back and to be angry. So guard your heart and mind. Be aware of that as you do this practice. And the last thing, very simply, is to go on this journey with Jesus and community. You need Jesus. You need community to go back and do healthy work. Otherwise, quite frankly, it could be damaging. So I want to warn you. Right? Don't go to the past on your own without a good founding of who Jesus says that you are, who he is in your life, and a good representation of truth from Scripture and those around you. Otherwise, you could open yourself back up to lies that are very simply not true and pain that is undealt with. Some of you have past and brokenness and trauma and abuse and things that are massively heavy and painful, and it might not be something you need to deal with on your own. It might need to be with community or a therapist or a counselor. And all of those things are good things. I came from a tradition that said once you started following Jesus, everything is supposed to be kind of up and to the right. Like you don't deal with the past, you look on to what's ahead. And Jesus is giving you new life and joy. And if you're in counseling, that's for people who are dysfunctional and weak. That's just not true. It's not true at all. Everyone has brokenness. No one starts with a clean slate. But with Jesus, all of it can be broken and we can move forward. And so I would encourage you, don't just do this alone, do it with Jesus and do it with community. And it might be your city group, it might be an individual in your city group, it might be a family friend or just someone really close to you, wherever you are. And again, it's all invitational. So if you don't do the work and you're like, that's terrifying, I'm not going there, totally hear you. Just here to help. So let me give you just a couple of things to think on. Identify the patterns. The Genogram tool. Guard your heart, and then do this with Jesus and community. Let's pray together. As you bow your heads, as you close your eyes, this is just a moment of privacy. A moment of considering all that maybe God is doing this morning. I spent a lot of time praying over you this week. I recognize the heaviness of this conversation. I recognize what it might bring up. I even recognize maybe the misunderstandings that can come from it. And so my prayer for you right now is that God would reveal to you the areas that he wants to bring healing. And so with your heads bowed and your eyes closed, that's just a moment of privacy for you. It's not like super spiritual to do that. It's just a moment of kind of blocking out what's going on around you, quieting your heart and mind. And maybe simply with me, you say, Jesus, what is it that you want me to know? Maybe some things have already come up. What is it that you want me to do? Patterns of thinking, patterns of behaving, ways of living that have caused pain to myself and others, things that I felt stuck in my entire life that I have really struggled to change. And Jesus, right now, I pray as we begin to open ourselves up to you in those spaces, as we press into our Genogram tool and just start to look back in order to open all of that up to you, would you meet us in power and love and forgiveness and mercy? God, we recognize that there is dysfunction. We recognize that there's brokenness that's passed on, but Jesus, you can break it all. You were buried for our sin, and you rose again to break it all, so we can be reparented into the family of God. So help us to find hope in that, and to draw near to you, to cling on to the mercy that is so readily available. Others of us in the room, Jesus, as we're processing what's going on the inside, some of us, we don't have a relationship with you. We've heard about you, we've been around you. Maybe this is the first time we're ever hearing about your love for us. Maybe we're familiar with our brokenness, but we've never found a way to deal with it. So I pray for my friends in the room, anyone who would not call themselves a follower of Jesus, anyone who has never made the volitional decision in their head and their heart to say, Jesus, I believe that you are who you said you are, that you died for my sin, and were buried. You rose again to forgive me, to make me new, to give me freedom, to give me new life. And Jesus, I want to follow you today. I want to be adopted into your family today. I want to be made new today. And for my friends in the room that are praying that for the first time, Jesus, I pray that in their heart and mind, they understand that heaven is rejoicing as they make that decision, and that we want to rejoice alongside them. For others of us in the room, Jesus, as you reveal what you want us to do next this week in this practice, give us the boldness and protect us as we take this journey together. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.